police salute for a man who died under an officer's knee. Impassioned pleas for change as George Floyd is laid to rest.
Someone said, "Make America great again," but when has America ever been great?
As the Black Lives Matter movement maintains its intensity, new footage of heavy-handed policing in the US has come to light. Confronting an uncomfortable past, British protesters call for imperialist monuments to fall. The debate is now flaring up again in Australia. And a young boy back in his parents' arms after 2 freezing nights lost in dense Victorian bushland.
This is SBS World News with Ricardo Goncalves.
Good evening. George Floyd, the man whose death at the knee of a Minneapolis police officer ignited global unrest over racial injustice, has been laid to rest in his hometown in Texas. The 46-year-old was remembered as a father, a brother, an activist and gentle giant whose words had a way of inspiring everyone around him. His family using the service to plead for lasting change.
In Houston, Texas, the hometown of George Perry Floyd Jr., a police salute before a final farewell.
For God is our refuge and strength.
A man who once told friends he aspired to one day touch the world, doing just that. Little did George Floyd know the legacy he'd leave behind, or the scores of people he ultimately inspired.
Beneath his wings.
At the Fountain of Praise Church, a somber yet uplifting service.
It's time for us to celebrate his life. We may weep, we may mourn, we'll be comforted, and we will find hope.
Grief punctuated with joy.
I just want to say to him, I love you, and I thank God for giving me my own personal Superman.
George Floyd was from a rough neighbourhood, but he was remembered as a gentle giant. A gregarious star athlete in high school, his basketball and football skills earned him a scholarship, becoming the first of his siblings to go to college. But his education wasn't completed, his 20s seeing setbacks, drug offences, prison sentences. Before Reformation, Mr. Floyd turning to his faith and using his missteps as a lesson for at-risk youths.
We're going to make sure that those who look through time, that they will know that he made a difference within his time, because he changed not only this country, not only the United States, he changed the world. George Floyd changed the world.
A father of 5, a part-time rapper, a security guard, relatives recalling a spiritually grounded family man able to motivate others with his words. It was George Floyd's final words, "I can't breathe," with an officer's knee pinned to his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which energised a global movement for racial justice.
Their officer showed no remorse while watching my uncle's soul leave his body. He begged and pleaded many times just for you to get up, but you just pushed harder. Why must this system be corrupt and broken? Laws were already put in place for the African American system to fail. And these laws need to be changed. No more hate crimes, please. Someone said, "Make America great again," but when has America ever been great?
The US president never named, but regularly rebuked.
We are fighting an institutional, systemic problem that has been allowed to permeate since we were brought to these shores. And we are fighting wickedness in high places. The mother of Eric Garner, will you stand?
Among the 500 in attendance, people who know the Floyd family's pain all too well. The parents of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, both unarmed men who died at the hands of police, there in solidarity.
Hello, everyone, on this day of prayer.
From presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, a video message of support.
We cannot leave this moment thinking we can once again turn away from racism that stings at our very soul. As you said, Gianna, your daddy will have changed the world.
change already in motion. Houston's mayor announcing an executive order to ban strangleholds and chokeholds.
We honor him not because he was perfect, but we honor him today because when he took his last breath, the rest of us will now be able to breathe.
The procession drawing to a close, a horse-drawn carriage taking Mr. Floyd to his final resting place. The man who unknowingly became a symbol of America's racial struggles laid next to his mother, the woman who he cried out for as he lay dying. Omar Dehan, SBS World News.
New police body cam footage has emerged in the US showing the fatal arrests of 2 other black men whose final words were also, "I can't breathe." Protests calling for an overhaul of the police system in the US are gaining momentum as states and cities across the country take steps towards major reform. And a warning, some viewers may find this story distressing.
March 2019, Texas. Avia Ambler's final moments. The 40-year-old tasered by police after he failed to dim his headlights as he drove past a deputy. Police say he resisted arrest. Mr. Ambler heard saying, "I can't breathe" several times before becoming unresponsive. He was later pronounced dead in hospital. The case initially ruled justifiable homicide. It's now under investigation. May 2019, Oklahoma, another deadly pursuit.
Oh, please hurt me.
It was alleged Derek Scott, like George Floyd, used a fake $20 bill. His final words also,
"I can't breathe, please. Help me."
The officers cleared of any wrongdoing. The 41-year-old's death ruled unknown. The videos only just released following demands from activists. As George Floyd was remembered and honoured across America, families of victims of police brutality in New York gathered to demand accountability. The state repealing a law that keeps police officers' records a secret. New York City is set to redirect some of its $6 billion police budget away from enforcement and towards intervention programs. Protests across America bringing sudden and sweeping reform. Minneapolis is preparing to disband and rebuild its entire police department. LA announcing major funding cuts. Seattle considering a 50% reduction in the police budget. Police unions pushing back.
This isn't stained by someone in Minneapolis. Stop treating us like animals and thugs and start treating us with some respect.
President Trump is reportedly considering backing some reforms, but today is the country united in grief. Silence from the president, aside from a series of tweets, not one of which mentioned George Floyd. Instead, he tweeted a conspiracy theory about a 75-year-old protester who was pushed to the ground by police last week. Without evidence, he suggested Martin Gugino could be an anti-fascist provocateur. "I watched. He fell harder than was pushed. Was aiming scanner. Could be a setup," he tweeted.
You think the blood coming out of his head was staged? Is that what you're saying? You saw his head hit the pavement. You see blood on the pavement. Maybe he fell harder than he was pushed. How reckless, how irresponsible, how mean, how crude.
The backlash also coming from within his own party.
It was a shocking thing to say, and I won't dignify it with any further comment.
Others refusing to comment. Abby O'Brien, SBS World News.
Let's cross now live to ABC America correspondent Ines de la Cuatera. She is standing by in Washington. Ines, how is all of this affecting Trump's poll numbers?
Yeah, so we're seeing the president's poll numbers drop. According to the website 538, 54.8% of Americans now disapprove of the job the president is doing. And we're at the same time seeing Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden's poll numbers surge. He is doing much better than he was. He is now in a stronger position to oust an incumbent president than any challenger since Bill Clinton in the summer of 1992. Now, Joe Biden has, of course, been a lot more visible in recent days. We saw him put out video messages. We saw him meet with the family of George Floyd. He has been trying really hard to draw a contrast between himself and President Trump, and it seems to be working.
Ines, the polls have been wrong before. Could the economy save him?
Yeah, so the polls, you'll remember, in 2016 had Hillary Clinton winning, and of course Donald Trump went on to win the election. That came as a big surprise. So I do think there's a lot of skepticism here when it comes to these polls, and the feeling is that the election will be held in November. That's still a few months away, so a lot could happen between now and then. But certainly the economy is doing better. We saw that the stock market is on the rise, and the jobs reports recently released are also much better than expected. So the president has been talking a lot about that. He's been hyping that up. He really wants people to know that the economy is doing better, because he certainly hopes that's going to help him in November.
And Inez, the president has taken a strong stand against defunding the police, but is it possible he might embrace some reform?
Right. So we're seeing reports that there are some within the White House advisors who are pushing the president to do something, to take a look at possibly reforming certain aspects of the police. We saw President Trump actually meeting with law enforcement officials this week who did tell the president that it could be beneficial to reform certain aspects of the police. But at the same time, the president has kind of branded himself as this law and order president. His whole campaign was also based on supporting officers and the thin blue line here in the country. So he's in a tricky position here, but certainly that's something we're seeing that some White House advisors are pushing for.
OK. ABC correspondent Inez de la Cuetera there in Washington. Thank you. Protesters in the UK are calling for the removal of a monument to controversial imperialist figure Cecil Rhodes from Oxford University. London's mayor has promised a review of all statues and street names in the capital, and there are calls for a similar review here.
With renewed vigour, protesters descended on Oxford University, calling for its statue of Cecil Rhodes to be taken down.
The statue symbolises that the university still hasn't shown a clear commitment to engaging with issues that black students face.
It's just a representation of a time gone by, you know. This isn't the place to have it.
Kneeling in solidarity and in silence against one of the most controversial figures of Britain's imperial past. Rhodes considered the English a master race, believing them superior to all others, particularly the black Africans that he ruled over. A businessman and politician, he was dominant throughout southern Africa in the late 19th century, pushing the British Empire to seize control over vast areas. But the Rhodes Scholarship, established under the terms of Rhodes's final will, is one of the most prestigious in the academic world, posing a conflict for those like South African Maratahi Kale, herself a beneficiary.
For many, many years, the Rhodes Scholarship was awarded to white men, which was essentially the work and forced labour of black people, sponsoring the education of white men to further colonise and neo-colonise the rest of the world.
The Rhodes Must Fall campaign isn't new, but has been reinvigorated by the Black Lives Matter protests sweeping the globe and the removal of similarly controversial statues both in the UK and around the world. This statue of slave trader Edward Colston was thrown into Bristol Harbour on the weekend. A memorial of Robert Milligan, another man who profited from the enslavement of black people, no longer stands outside a London museum after Mayor Sadiq Khan promised a review of statues and street names across the city.
Although he brought fantastic wealth, I'm sure, he also brought fantastic suffering as well to the people who were exploited through the slave trade.
A statue of King Leopold II in Belgium was graffitied and burnt over the weekend, while a Confederate statue in the US was removed under the cover of dark. This monument to Captain James Cook says he discovered Australia in 1770. It was vandalised in 2017 by those who say it ignores tens of thousands of years of Indigenous history. It's one of a number of controversial statues around the country, and their future could now be up for review.
There's an urgent case to review these statues because I think they embody a past that Australians don't want to belong to.
But historians suggest tearing down statues isn't the only way to correct the record. In 1994, a plaque was added to the Explorers Monument in Fremantle after consultation with the local Aboriginal community.
The Aboriginal translation that's there reads, "Let us all sit down together in peace." Now, that's a statement of reconciliation and common understanding. And I think in our civic spaces, we need to enter into that conversation.
The Australian Heritage Council advises the federal government on heritage matters, but local council and state governments are individually responsible for the management of statues around the country. Matt Kennellan, SBS World News.
Still to come, the legal fight over an Aboriginal man tasered in police custody. The entire incident was filmed on police body cam. Why the man's lawyer claims the use of force was unlawful. We'll have that story shortly. The opposition has used the return of Parliament to pummel the government over the state of the economy. Scott Morrison opening the door to other sectors being taken off JobKeeper before September, joining childcare workers who will stop receiving the payments next month.
JobKeeper! Angry aviation workers JobKeeper! Shouting for their share of stimulus.
We should be all getting this JobKeeper payment. It's just not for some, it's for all.
It's fairness for all. How come everyone gets it, we don't get it?
As Labor MPs literally lined up to whack the government.
Who will be next from this Prime Minister's broken promise to rip away JobKeeper?
We know that our economy is not going to snap back to normal.
They want to cut.
Nobody should be left behind.
After childcare workers were told they'd be dropped from JobKeeper in July, 3 days after the Prime Minister pledged.
The 6 months of provision of JobKeeper has been set out in legislation and people can count on that.
Why did the Prime Minister break his promise?
JobKeeper legislation does remain in place until the end of September, Mr Speaker. But where there is a better way to do things, we won't step aside from doing them in a better way.
This is a reverse Titanic from this government. Women and children put last by this government.
Scott Morrison opening the door to rolling back the $1,500 a fortnight payments in other sectors.
Where we can do better than the arrangements that we have in place, then we will certainly act.
Refusing to broaden the scheme.
We're now on the road back. It's not about going further down, Mr Speaker.
Conceding the coalition's much-hyped budget surplus is gone.
It is a recession, Mr Speaker. There's no doubt about that.
Members on my left.
And I don't think there is an Australian in this country, Mr Speaker, who doesn't understand the reason why.
As the opposition zeroed in on the scheme's $60 billion miscalculation and another costly error.
Will the Prime Minister apologise to Australians targeted by the illegal robo-debt scheme?
Mr Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition would be aware, the matters that he referred to are still being pursued through legal processes.
The government framing this as a fight between economic enablers and endless providers, as Scott Morrison looks beyond the pandemic and the next election.
The economic changes that we will put in place over the next 2 years and 5 years will determine the economic success of the next 30.
As politics too slowly returns to normal.
Constant whining, Mr Speaker, a great deal of immaturity. Mr Speaker.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm not being repetitive.
Brett Mason, SBS World News.
Coming up next, how emergency crews finally tracked down a 14-year-old boy lost in bushland. The deepening row between Australia and China, what foreign students make of claims that our universities aren't safe, and a new warning about cholesterol. Even heart attack survivors aren't taking the threat seriously.
Tonight at 7:30, Tony Robinson's World by Rail. Then, 5 high-profile Australians discover what it's like to suddenly lose everything and find themselves on the cold streets in a continuation of Filthy Rich and Homeless, followed by Reprisal.
Here's the old girl, exactly as I remember her.
Planes, trains and automobiles.
It's the best way to travel, if you can.
What does it take to get the monarchy on the move?
It's a secure operation.
No airport queuing for that.
Find out from those in the know.
I flew the Prince of Wales primarily, and we got on first-name terms. He would call me Bob, and I would call him Your Royal Highness.
Secrets of Royal Travel starts Monday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
In a brand new series, take an unprecedented look at those fighting for permanent residency.
Are we going to win? I don't know.
Who Gets to Stay in Australia starts Wednesday the 1st of July on SBS and on demand.
We finally got this home for our family. We need to protect it all no matter what.
Well, I've read some reviews and think we should do one simple thing and get real life insurance.
With real life insurance, your family would receive a cash payment from $100,000 up to $1 million if you passed away. And our claims process is as stress-free as possible with our award-winning Australian-based team. Call 137 025 or search Real Life Insurance.
Easy on yourself.
The New South Wales Government is helping businesses get back to work with financial support plus information to make your business safe with a detailed COVID safety plan. For free personalised support, visit nsw.gov.au.
At Spotlight, a window's what you make it, with 30 to 40% off the entire range of made-to-measure curtains, blinds and shutters. Call 1300 662 742 for your free in-home measuring quote. So open it, roll it and warm it for less. Conditions apply. At Spotlight, it's what you make it.
Together, we're getting there. And driving away has never felt better, especially with the incredible drive-away price of $59,888 for the NX 300 two-wheel drive luxury. Contact your Lexus dealer today.
Hi, honey. I've got the pork roast. I'll be home soon.
Riverview Farms pork roast. Perfectly cooked for your family and ready to go, just like Nana made it every time.
This June on SBS On Demand.
Tonight, you're going to experience something completely different.
It's a month of drama and secrets below the surface.
Tell me what you got so far. Off the record. I'm going to show you something.
Top up your drinks, because it's going to get hot here tonight.
I wonder what it's like to see the world that way. Quite a story.
All yours.
You're an enemy.
I'm an informer. We have a credible threat to public safety. Don't you think it's time we kick these Nazis' butts?
Freeze! Let me see your hands!
That's June on SBS On Demand.
Taking you from the Arctic to the Andes, the Rockies to Machu Picchu.
Look at that.
Tony Robinson's World by Rail starts tonight 7:30 on SBS and On Demand.
A teenager with autism has defied the odds, surviving 2 nights in freezing and treacherous forest conditions north of Melbourne. After an intensive search, Will Callaghan was found alive and well almost 3 days after wandering off a track while hiking at Mount Disappointment.
A missing boy is reunited with his parents, and on a mountain called Disappointment, there's perhaps been never so much elation and emotion. While Will Callaghan tucked into one of his favourite treats in the back of an ambulance, his mother was sending out a message of heartfelt thanks to the hundreds of volunteers and rescue workers who search for her son.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful. You're all amazing.
It was a locally raised volunteer, Ben Gibbs, who found a barefooted Will about 10 minutes off the track from where he vanished on Monday afternoon.
He was really angelic, so he was just sort of real peacefully standing there, and he looked in reasonable health. You know, he wasn't shivering too bad. He didn't have socks on, so put some socks on him and a jacket.
And used one of the non-verbal autistic 14-year-old's favourite television characters to keep him calm.
I heard that he liked Thomas the Tank, and so I just sort of talked to him about Diesel and stuff like that.
For rescue teams nearby, it was a moment of pure joy.
Just incredible. We were only about 100 metres from him when he got found. So, I don't know, it was just so relieved that he was alive and safe.
The discovery of a pair of shoes the first clue as to his whereabouts.
He is alert, warm, eating and drinking, and he actually asked for McDonald's.
These are the sort of conditions in which Will Callaghan managed to survive 2 freezing nights. Dense undergrowth, limited visibility and masses of regrowth from the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires.
I am really overwhelmed. He's well and as be expected, I guess, under the circumstances. He's quite calm considering.
And off to the hospital for a checkup with a possible drive-through detour for a food-loving teen who defied the odds.
He's just so special, and so we're so privileged to have him in our life.
Gareth Boreham, SBS World News.
And a 13-year-old boy with autism has also been found in the Blue Mountains, hundreds of kilometres away from where he went missing. Darshan Siegel walked off from a car park in the Port Stephens area while travelling from the north coast. New South Wales Police were alerted just after 10:30 last night that the boy was missing and began a search with a dog squad but could not find him. The teenager was found at a high school in Katoomba this morning. An Indigenous man convicted of assaulting 2 Northern Territory police officers while being arrested for a breach of his parole has filed for an appeal in the Northern Territory Supreme Court. Police body cam footage shows the man being pepper sprayed and then tasered. The use of the taser will be called into dispute during the appeal. And a warning, this story contains vision some viewers may find distressing.
Please, don't tell me.
This is the moment a taser was used during the arrest of Johannes Mangura. His lawyer says the use of this taser was unlawful.
It was neither necessary nor proportionate to taser our client in view of the risk that he posed to himself or the police officers.
Please don't do that.
Like I said, we don't have a choice.
Mr Mangura had been trying to pay off a fine when he was taken into an interview room and told he'd breached his parole and that he would be arrested.
Turn around. I want to do that, please.
Mr Mangura did not comply with directions and was first pepper sprayed before being tasered. Mr Mangura was charged with resisting a member of the police force, unlawfully assaulting 2 police officers by biting one's hand and the other one's wrist and behaving in a disorderly manner in the Numbulwar police station.
I'm going to thump you. You can't bite me. I'm going to thump you. What the was all that for?
He was found guilty of all charges.
The police promulgate their own guidelines, known as the Police General Orders. Ordinarily, tasers should not be used unless there is an imminent risk of serious harm, either to the person being tasered or the police, and we say that there was no such risk in this case.
It will also be argued that Mr Mangura should have been allowed to speak to a lawyer prior to his arrest and be given an interpreter.
If the police had offered him an interpreter and if the police had offered him or allowed him an opportunity to speak with a lawyer, it's entirely possible that none of what occurred subsequently would have occurred.
Northern Territory Police say they won't be commenting because the matter is now subject to an appeal. The case will go before the NT Supreme Court next month. Anita Bole, SBS World News.
Close to 30 years after the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, one of the commissioners has slammed Australia's lack of progress. Pat Dodson, now a Labor senator, today emotionally addressed Parliament about the ongoing problem for Indigenous Australians.
For too long, nice words, good intentions, but the lack of action and commitment has not seen a reduction to the custodies or the deaths in custodies. It's seen an escalation in the social indicators that diminish First Nations people and diminish us as a nation.
There have been 434 Indigenous deaths in custody since the Royal Commission ended in 1991. And for more on this issue, tune into The Point to find out what's next after the weekend's Black Lives Matter rallies. That's tonight at 8:30 on NITV. 4 Labor politicians are self-isolating in the nation's capital tonight, having been sent home from Parliament after attending those protests. Senator Malandiri McCarthy and MPs Warren Snowden, Annika Wells and Graham Perrott are awaiting test results for COVID-19 after the weekend's rallies. While the opposition leader says it's just precautionary, Green Senator Janet Rice has drawn criticism for not self-isolating despite also attending.
They've gone off and got tested out of an abundance of caution. That's a reasonable thing for them to do.
I'm following the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, who said that it wasn't necessary to self-isolate.
Senator Rice says that she will be following strict social distancing procedures for the rest of the week in Parliament. Australia has recorded another 7 cases of COVID-19 today. 4 of those were in Victoria, where a disability services centre was forced to close after a client tested positive. The other 3 cases were recorded in New South Wales and were all quarantined travellers from overseas. 102 Australians have died from COVID-19. An inquiry into Australia's largest source of coronavirus infections, the Ruby Princess cruise ship, has heard passengers' flights were a factor in allowing the ship to dock before swab results had returned. New South Wales Chief Human Biosecurity Officer Dr Sean Tobin was one of the officials who gave permission for passengers to disembark. He told the inquiry one of the reasons the decision was made was so passengers could make their flights to return home. The ship has been linked to more than 650 cases of COVID-19 and 21 deaths. And community sport will return in New South Wales for all ages from July the 1st as the state continues to ease coronavirus restrictions. Children's sport had been slated to resume from that date, but the government will now also lift restrictions on adult sport. It comes as Australia's most populous state reached a new milestone, recording no community transmission for 2 weeks. The federal government has again been forced on the defensive over China's claims of a rise in racist incidents towards Asians during the pandemic. Just days after warning tourists to reconsider travelling here, China's Ministry of Education has now warned students to rethink plans of resuming study.
The sight of bustling campuses unseen in Australia for months. While universities prepare to reopen next month, the travel ban still preventing international students like Flora Zhao from returning.
There's definitely a bond with Australia.
China's Ministry of Education cautioning students to reconsider resuming studying in Australia because of what it's calling a rise in racist incidents targeting Asians as a result of COVID-19. That warning not fazing all students who say racism is a global problem.
We cannot deny that this is a situation that exists globally. And there's definitely a concern, especially with COVID situation.
Chinese students and international students are most welcome in Australia. And I have to say that there really isn't anything to fear.
Universities Australia says Australia is one of the safest places in the world. The federal government has also rejected Beijing's assertion of a spate of racist attacks.
I will simply say that yes, there has been some high-profile incidences occur in Australia, but they are the actions of an absolute tiny minority of cowardly idiots.
Chinese students make up almost 30% of Australia's international students, raking in about $12 billion for universities annually.
Well, it would be a real blow to both countries. In the end, international education is about a two-way flow of students.
This just days after China warned tourists to reconsider travel because of the same reason.
It's not unexpected at all. I think a lot of people have been concerned that China might try to tighten the tap on the flow of Chinese students to Australia.
While government ministers continue with a diplomatic approach, some backbench MPs are more blunt and say China is punishing Australia after calling for an international inquiry into coronavirus.
I think we should see it for what it really is, which is a sort of a clumsy attempt at propaganda to use leverage that really isn't there.
They put a lie to the claims of the Chinese Communist Party that Australia is an unsafe country for Chinese people.
The latest flare-up in tensions between Beijing and Canberra follows a trade dispute over beef and barley. Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
Beijing has hit back against a Harvard Medical School study which suggested COVID-19 had been spreading in China as early as last August, labelling the suggestion ridiculous. According to the study, satellite imagery of car parks in Wuhan hospitals showed an increase in visitors, while online search queries relating to flu symptoms had been on the rise well before the outbreak was confirmed in December. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman claimed the data was superficial. And still to come, the young Australian teenager trapped in China at the peak of the pandemic. She was in the virus epicentre when the outbreak began and has only just returned home. But the ordeal's not quite over yet. We'll have that story later in the program. In South Africa, a government ban on cigarettes to try and slow the spread of COVID-19 has sparked a surge in the sale of black market tobacco products. South Africa has had almost 53,000 confirmed cases of the virus and at least 1,162 deaths.
Heavily armed South African soldiers. Their mission to curb the spread of COVID-19
You and your friends, let me catch you.
is becoming more and more about this.
But there seems to be also a lot of smuggling going on here, huh?
They smuggle illegal cigarettes.
Racing along the dusty banks of the Limpopo, the border with Zimbabwe, hunting for cigarettes. As soon as South Africa's COVID-19 lockdown measures included a ban on cigarette sales, the illegal trade from the north took off.
Have people stopped smoking?
People will not stop smoking. Yeah, it's like wanting to ban someone to stop eating. Because if someone is a smoker, you cannot stop him from smoking.
The Zimbabwean smuggler agreed to speak to us if we hid his identity. He says army patrols and 25 miles of brand new border fence isn't stopping the now booming trade.
We're getting much better than before COVID time.
So your profits are up?
The profits are up.
This is the ones we're selling here, yeah.
And smokers in Johannesburg are willing to pay.
What can I say? If people need cigarettes, what must I do?
On several street corners, we find cigarettes in minutes.
Where's this from?
Prices are up fourfold, but now not even a single cent is going to the state. The government continues to stand behind its decision, saying it's about the health of its citizens.
Why continue with the ban if cigarettes are still being smoked and no money is going to the state?
And about the cigarettes, I think it's important that where there is crime, crime is attended to.
Do you feel bad about what you're doing, or you don't?
Yeah, it's not good, but in terms of making money, I know it's bad, but in terms of making money, I use that money to support my children.
The cigarette ban seems to have done little to keep people healthy, but it is pushing many to break the law.
In Burundi, outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza has died from a heart attack aged 55. Local reports in Burundi have linked his death to COVID-19. His wife reportedly contracted the virus 10 days ago. Well, this year is set to go down as the worst in history for the global airline industry. Amid the turmoil, Mediterranean islands are battling to salvage the summer.
After 11 weeks in lockdown, Cyprus begins the Herculean task, luring back international visitors. This first group of 22 passengers arriving on an overnight commercial flight from Israel.
Because my daughter, now she have a baby, she delivered a baby girl. I come in the first flight to see her.
In a bid to salvage summer tourism, the island now permitting people to fly in from 19 countries with low COVID-19 infection rates. That does not include sunseekers from the UK. Passengers will also need to provide a health certificate 3 days in advance. If the Mediterranean sun isn't enough to entice visitors, Cyprus has also offered to foot the bill for anyone who contracts coronavirus while on holiday. As more and more countries begin their slow recovery, the airline industry is braced for its worst economic nosedive on record.
It's an unprecedented crisis. It's a disaster for the industry.
The losses steeper than first forecast, with projections at more than 120 billion Australian dollars for just this year alone. The grounding of fleets resulting in a 50% drop in revenue across 290 airlines and wiping out more than a decade of growth. Next year, the industry hopes losses can be limited, but there are huge clouds of uncertainty.
Now, if a second wave comes back, we hope that governments will take different measures because they will have the methodology, the equipment, the readiness, the plans, and if we could avoid complete lockdowns, that would be better for everybody.
More than a dozen airlines worldwide have sought government help. France, the latest to offer a bailout, unveiling a €15 billion rescue package in order to save hundreds of thousands of jobs.
So, this morning we declare a state of emergency to save our aeronautical industry, to enable it to be more competitive, more carbon-free in the 21st century.
It was Hong Kong yesterday, coming to the rescue of financially battered airline Cathay Pacific. In South Africa, the government has said it might not welcome international tourists until next year. Virginia Langeberg, SBS World News.
Consumers are increasingly being attracted to the share market as it continues to rise, but experts say a quick end to stimulatory efforts may jolt the market. The S&P ASX 200 rose again today to be 35.3% higher than its March low. A faster than expected lifting of COVID-19 restrictions globally has some predicting future company earnings may not be hit as hard as first thought if the economy doesn't see a second wave of infections. Now, central banks around the world have also gone into overdrive with massive stimulus measures pumping more money into the economy. Now, this chart from Bloomberg shows the fastest injection of money supply on record from the US Federal Reserve. Here, the Reserve Bank is also purchasing government bonds, providing the government with cash to hand back to the economy, and some of that is finding its way to the share market.
That's the key. If they don't unwind the stimulus in a very deliberate, well-communicated manner, that can be the shock for the equity market. So it's in the interest of central banks, which are independent, and governments with their fiscal stimulus to be clear communicators and be very cognizant that it's very sensitive out there, the sentiment, and it's fragile. So the unwinding of this can be the risk for a sell-off.
Westpac says in an unusual trend, more people are nominating shares as their preferred investment option than real estate, supporting this shift to the equity market. It comes as the bank saw a remarkable recovery in consumer confidence, with the June sentiment index returning to pre-COVID levels. Now, that's thanks to the easing of restrictions, but the number of pessimists still way outnumbers optimists. Also, in a surprise response, more people are feeling confident about the employment outlook, despite a predicted rise in the unemployment rate, which is likely to stay high for some time.
But of course, we do have the spectre of the unwinding of the JobKeeper package by the end of September, and some people that do have jobs will find that with the ending of the package that won't be the case. So I think there's a bit of false security there around the employment story. And that's why I believe that whilst we've seen this extraordinary momentum over the last couple of months, I don't expect it to continue.
So by the close, the 200 finished only just positive, but it was a gain nonetheless, and a seventh gain in a row for the market. CSL did well, but the banks were down. Harvey Norman added 7% as it announced a special dividend. Afterpay hit yet another record. The Aussie dollar gained a bit of ground after the Bureau said new home sales or new home loans fell at the fastest rate in 5 years because it was less than expected. Banks have benefited by more than $6 billion by failing to pass on interest rate cuts from credit cards over the last decades. Consumer Group Choice says some cards tied to reward programs have even increased their rates. The Reserve Bank has cut the official cash rate to a record low of 0.25%.
Paying more than 10% in interest on your credit card, that's way too much. You should be shopping around for a better deal, because banks have taken advantage of confusion over credit cards to just keep whacking us with massive interest rates.
The Australian Banking Association told SBS News that Australian banks are fiercely competitive when it comes to credit cards, offering a wide range of products. Coming up next, some of the biggest names in Aussie music plead for help to keep their industry alive, and why Roger Federer will sit out for the rest of the year.
Tonight, 8:30.
We're sending you back onto the streets with someone else who's sleeping rough.
Man, welcome to my abode. I don't feel safe at all.
Don't touch me.
I have not had a shower in 5 days.
I just wanted her to be safe.
This is not a life for anyone.
Filthy Rich and Homeless. Tonight, 8:30 on SBS and on demand. Now streaming.
You're just thinking to yourself, there's no cure for this.
Dateline follows two Aussies, both with MS.
Give me my life back.
One is trying to get to Russia for a stem cell transplant. The other
I'm booked up at the moment.
can't get home because the pandemic has closed international borders.
Worried about my own safety now.
on the feed all your healthy vegetable needs in your morning coffee. Reality is catching up to science fiction.
It's actually not too bad.
Now streaming on SBS On Demand.
Over 16,500 New South Wales police are out there. And police vehicles can enforce the road rules anywhere, anytime. So if you drink and drive, speed, don't wear a seatbelt, take illegal drugs and drive, or hold your phone while driving, you can stop it or cop it.
Thank you. Hey, did you ever get your life insurance sorted?
Not yet.
Well, we did one simple thing to protect our family's financial future and got real life insurance.
Okay, send me their details and I'll give them a call.
Protecting your family is easy with our value for money products that you can tailor to suit your budget. With real life insurance, your family would receive up to $1 million if you passed away. Call 137 026 or search Real Life Insurance.
Easy on yourself.
Harvey Norman has everything you need for your home, including the very best of Australian-made bedding. Make your statement with gorgeous Australian-made timber and fabric beds and customise the fabric, colour and timber stain to suit your style. Our huge range features the best names in Australian-made mattresses and ensembles. Sealy, Sleepmaker, Beauty Rest, King Coil and Body Balance. Complete your sleep experience with beautiful Australian-made Manchester. All this, plus 60 months interest-free. Shop in our spacious stores, support local manufacturers and choose Australian-made. Now at Harvey Norman.
Acclaimed Aussie chef John Tasered returns home.
I travelled 16,000 kilometres to eat this. That's potato cake.
Travelling far and wide, showcasing the very best of Australian produce.
Have a learning.
And rediscovering the foods that shaped him.
Why wouldn't you be laughing with a view like that every day?
John Tasered's Australia starts Sunday 8:30 on SBS Food and On Demand. Expand your mind with the weird and the wonderful.
Vegas. It was inevitable. Oh my God.
I want to do it!
Sorry?
Weird and Wonderful continues with Swiss Army Man. Tonight, 9:55 on SBS World Movies.
Over 1,000 Australian musicians and industry workers are calling on the federal government to provide immediate financial support, warning that thousands of jobs are on the line due to the coronavirus pandemic. In an open letter to the Morrison government, artists want the JobKeeper payment to be extended to the arts sector, as well as extra funding for the industry's recovery.
What you know about the pain and the sacrifice?
Rapper Elfresh the Lion is used to performing to big live audiences, but with nowhere to perform, he's lost nearly all of his work as a musician.
No work's dried up, you know, and you have to adapt. You're forced to adapt, but for the most part, you're just seeing all your work dry up.
They tell me to go home, but I come from here. I can see it. Elfresh is one of hundreds of musicians who are calling on the federal government to help save the struggling industry, which is predicted to lose over $500 million in just 6 months. Many in the sector do not qualify for government support, despite losing significant income.
Literally, live music fell off a cliff with the shutdown of all venues and festivals and events and any sort of gathering, which was the right thing for government to do, so everyone understands that, but the impact was immediate.
The open letter, signed by the likes of Jimmy Barnes and Jessica Mauboy, contains 5 key requests: to expand JobKeeper to include gig or contract musicians and extend the timeframe to access the payments beyond September, establish a $40 million recovery fund, as well as extra Australia Council funding, and tax offsets for live music venues. Live performances are a staple of all recording artists' income, but at the moment that's just not an option. Almost all of the 4,000 live music venues across Australia are currently closed, with no certainty as to when they'll be able to reopen.
We're the first to close, and it's very clear that we're going to be one of the last to reopen doors with crowds of a feasible size, basically.
The federal government is yet to make any commitments. In a statement, a spokesman for Arts Minister Minister Paul Fletcher told SBS News Minister Fletcher has been in regular dialogue with the arts, entertainment and screen sectors to build the government's understanding of the specific hurdles these sectors may face and pathways for restarting these businesses.
My people by face before I know the name.
For Elfresh, he's confident the industry will survive.
It's forcing me to think about how I need to change what I do.
It might just look a little different. Amelia Dunn, SBS World News.
As the threat of COVID-19 eases in Australia, health experts are warning people to return their focus to heart health. Heart attacks and strokes are the biggest killers in Australia, but a new study shows many are at a high risk are not taking enough medication.
Come through.
Every day, 20 Australians die from a heart attack, and Leo Tenoy is acutely aware of the risk.
So every day I say to myself, Dad passed away at 52 of a heart, disease and stroke and stuff like that. And I'm 50 years old and, I have to be responsible.
Cardiovascular disease can be linked to genetics, but is also related to diet and exercise. At 150 kilograms, Leo Tenoy had high cholesterol, which put him at risk of a heart attack. So the former NRL player took action, dropping 30 kilograms and taking his medication consistently.
Today I weighed in at 121, so I'm very happy.
But many people with high cholesterol don't do enough, according to a new report by the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute. The study looked at more than 100,000 Australians who've had a heart attack or stroke before and found almost half were failing to reduce their cholesterol to safe levels. This is despite the overwhelming majority being prescribed medication.
Well, we don't know if they're not taking it or whether they're not just being given enough of it.
The report's author says follow-up appointments would save lives. Cholesterol is a waxy substance found in blood, which is used to make cells and hormones, but too much of it can block arteries, causing a heart attack or stroke. Alatange is a doctor in Western Sydney. She says GPs need to understand their patients' culture to help them adapt to a healthy lifestyle.
It's not a good idea to change the food, but rather to look at maybe the portion size, look at ways that it's been prepared, give advice about, well, we're going to have this huge meal. What are we going to do afterwards? Why don't we have a walk?
Leo Tenoy now plans to make the most of what he considers bonus years of life, the years he's reclaimed by taking control of his heart health.
Very good.
Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
Aboriginal leaders in Tasmania have met with Premier Peter Gutwein for the first time to discuss opportunities to close the gap. The talks, which were postponed due to COVID-19, included discussions on the return of Aboriginal land and representation in the Tasmanian Parliament. The leaders hope the momentum from the Black Lives Matter protests will help them achieve their goals.
We suggested that if ever there was a time for the government to rely on the goodwill of the public, now is the time to do it, because the Labor Party and the Greens will support the government if they have got a progressive agenda that delivers land, some sort of empowerment and compensation and dignity to Aboriginal people in this state.
A follow-up meeting will be held next month. And quickly in sport, Roger Federer will miss the remainder of the 2020 tennis season after undergoing knee surgery. The 20-time men's singles Grand Slam champion announced his decision on social media, telling followers he'd suffered a setback in his recovery. With professional tennis currently shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic, it is uncertain how many tournaments he will miss. The 38-year-old says he'll be ready for the beginning of the 2021 season. Coming up, the weather and back home, but no hugs allowed. An unusual return for an Australian teenager who was trapped in the original COVID-19 epicentre.
Taking you from the Arctic to the Andes, the Rockies to Machu Picchu.
Look at that.
Tony Robinson's World by Rail starts next on SBS.
How do you decide who gets to call Australia home?
Nobody should imagine that ministers make these decisions lightly.
Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
In a brand new series, take an unprecedented look at those fighting for permanent residency.
You're cutting into someone's life.
Are we going to win? I don't know.
I'm just giving you a call to let you know a decision came in today.
Who Gets to Stay in Australia starts Wednesday the 1st of July on SBS and On Demand.
Harvey Norman, everything for the heart of your home. With great deals across all the leading brands in cooking. Save up to $1,000 on Smeg Portofino packages and up to $700 on Smeg linear ovens. Save up to $800 on selected AEG kitchen appliances. Save up to $700 on selected Neff cooking appliances. Save up to $300 on selected Miele ovens and cooktops. Take advantage of 60 months interest-free. Updating, upgrading, or renovating. Create your dream kitchen now at Harvey Norman.
Go!
Yeah, no.
Four out of 5 people who are blind don't need to be. A simple $25 surgery can restore sight. Please donate today to help carry on Fred's vision.
Every eye is an eye.
This is how legends are made.
The legendary Toyota Supra is back. Experience the exhilaration for yourself. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
If you've been injured at work, on the road or in a public place, your normal life can suddenly stop. Check if you have a claim for compensation online in minutes so you can start again. With Slater and Gordon, tomorrow starts today.
If you've been awake for 17 hours or more, the effect on your driving is similar to having a blood alcohol content of 0.05. So remember to get a good night's sleep before your next drive, and don't trust your tired self.
We're being told to eat very healthy food, and one of the most healthy breads you're supposed to eat is sourdough. Now, it's very well to say eat sourdough, but what happens when you can't eat a whole loaf in one day? Because the next day it tastes like iron. It's as hard as iron. If you put it in the fridge or freeze it, it's even harder. I don't get it. This is Pauline McCarthy. Okay, bye.
Planes, trains and automobiles.
It's the best way to travel, if you can.
What does it take to get the monarchy on the move?
No airport queuing for that.
Secrets of Royal Travel starts Monday 7:30 on SBS and On Demand.
There's a world of stories available for free at SBS On Demand. Download the app or visit the website today. SBS On Demand. A world of difference.
To the weather, a trough and onshore winds are producing showers over eastern New South Wales and the Queensland coast. Wet easterly winds are bringing a few showers to the Northern Territory. High pressure is dominant elsewhere, bringing settled conditions with warm winds in the north and western interior. Major centres, some light morning frost. For Adelaide, a few showers for Sydney and Brisbane, Hobart along with Perth. There'll be early fog for Canberra along with Melbourne, sunny skies though in Darwin. Further afield, partly cloudy in Auckland and Wellington, some showers for Samoa and Tahiti, thunder in Nadi. In Southeast Asia, thunderstorms for Bangkok and Kuala Lumpur, cloudy in Denpasar, showers for Phnom Penh. Further north, clouds for Beijing and Seoul, showers expected for Manila, drizzly in Shanghai and Tokyo. Further west, hot in Baghdad, partly cloudy in Tehran and Islamabad, drizzle for Delhi, thunderstorms for Mumbai. Europe sees all clear conditions in Athens along with Moscow. Partly cloudy though in Stockholm, a few showers for Madrid, Paris, drizzle in Berlin. In Africa, partly cloudy in Addis Ababa and Casablanca, a few showers in Algiers and Nairobi, fine in Johannesburg, thunderstorms for Lagos. In South America, cloudy in Asuncion, Rio de Janeiro and Santiago, showers for Caracas and Bogota, fog for Buenos Aires. And for North America, showers for New York, Mexico City and Havana, partly cloudy in Toronto, thunderstorms in Vancouver and Miami. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought most international travel to a standstill and left thousands of Australians stranded overseas. A 14-year-old girl who has been stuck in Hubei province, the original epicentre for the virus, for more than 6 months, has finally touched down in Western Australia, reuniting with her family.
Anna Sher Moulton could hardly contain her excitement.
I counted 194 days since I last saw him.
A wave and then almost a hug. The new reality of the pandemic means reunions look a little different.
I had pictured that hugging and that moment for so long. And when I was just about to do it, being told I'm not allowed to do that. So I basically just I didn't know what to do.
I was
happy.
So excited, I couldn't even cry.
For 14-year-old Jessica, a holiday turned into a living nightmare. Hubei province was the first region in the world to be placed under COVID-19 lockdown.
You feel lonely, but it's not because you don't have anybody there. Like, you have all your friends and family, but you can only see them through a screen. So it's just not the same.
The teenager, originally from WA, missed out on 2 government-arranged evacuation flights in February because she was a minor and did not have an Australian adult who could accompany her back. And despite travel restrictions easing in parts of Hubei province in late March, it wasn't easy to get her out safely.
Every city had different rules, and considering she's under 18, then a lot of even authority didn't know when we rang them up. So we just had to basically make the decision and go with it.
Jessica is now again in quarantine, this time at home with her mother, as required by WA authorities. But she's just glad to be back and is enjoying some of the simple things in life.
In China, you can't drink tap water. You have to boil your water every time you drink it. So tap water was actually the first thing I was looking forward to.
Lynn Evelyn, SBS World News.
Britain's Prince Philip has turned 99 and is celebrating the occasion with very little public fanfare. The Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen Elizabeth released a photo from Windsor Castle, where they've been staying during the coronavirus lockdown. His birthday will be marked without traditional gun salutes due to restrictions on social gatherings, leaving the royal family to send their best wishes via video call. The Queen cancelled royal ceremonies for her own birthday in April for the first time in her 68-year reign. Recapping our top stories now, George Floyd has been laid to rest in his hometown in Texas. The 46-year-old's death at the knee of a Minneapolis police officer ignited global unrest over racial injustice. His family used the emotional service to plead for lasting change. New police body cam footage has emerged in the US showing the fatal arrests of 2 other black men. States and cities are taking steps towards major police reform. Protesters in the UK are calling for the removal of a monument to imperialist figure Cecil Rhodes from Oxford University. And a 14-year-old boy is back with his family tonight after almost 3 days lost in dense Victorian bushland. William Callaghan survived with just minor cuts and abrasions to his feet. That is the world this Wednesday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on the SBS News website shortly. Website's coming up right there. And you can also watch the bulletin live there, along with our app. We will be back with our next bulletin after tonight's episode of Reprisal of Good Night.